Welcome back. This is part 2 of our Guinea Pig to Green Thumb virtual gardening series. In this section, we're going to talk about planting calendars, spacing techniques, and container gardening. I hope you had a good start with part 1. I appreciate the feedback, and thank you for those of you who posted some questions online. We'd love to hear more feedback on this section as well. So let's get started with planting calendars. Planting calendar, the most important thing about that is to find out what zone you're in and to know your frost dates. In Mississippi, generally we plant lots of things in the fall. I like it for greens, but you can also grow beets and broccoli and cabbage. In fact, it's really the best time to grow broccoli and cabbage in Mississippi because the bug pressure is much lower. But lettuce and mustard greens, radishes and spinach, turnips, those are all good fall season crops. Now you're going to see your zone. Your zone has probably changed in the last 3 to 5 years. The USDA has changed the zones based on, climate change all over the globe. So make sure that you know what zone you're in. There will be a link in your email to tell you how to look up your zone. After you know what zone you're in, the next step is to create a garden plan. And that's basically figuring out what you want to grow in your garden and figuring out what time of year you need to plant it. In Mississippi, we can grow year-round, so this is an example of a spring planting, a summer planting, and a fall planting. Your fall planting can actually last all the way through the winter, most winters in Mississippi. Last winter was a little bit different, but most winters you can go green straight through January and February. Here's Matt's rough garden plan that we did for this time of the year. Right now he's at the end of the hot season, so we've got a few warm weather things, and then he's got cooler things down below. We'll change this plan for the fall planting. Fall freeze dates in Mississippi are included in this map, and you'll have a link to that also in your email. The main thing to know is when your fall frost date is, and then to count backwards to make sure that you have time to plant any of the things you want to grow. You can see how long it takes to grow something on the back of most packages. So let's simplify it. Instead of looking at the back of packages and counting frost dates, the easiest way that I know to do it is to use technology. There is this website that's included in your email called All Things Plants. You just type in your zip code and it tells you when to plant each and every one of the plants that you might want to grow in your garden. Choose 3 to 4 vegetables that you want to grow, that you know you'll eat and that your family will eat the first year around. I think 3 to 4 is probably plenty. Type in your zip code and it will tell you when to sow indoors if you're transplanting, to sow outdoors, or when to move your transplants outside. For this lesson, we're just going to plant straight into the ground. One more note about planting and timing. Unless you want to eat all of your vegetables at one time, you need to learn to succession plant. What that means is that in the zone of time that you're able to plant in your area, you might want to plant 2 rounds of seeds 10 days apart. Spacing is a big issue in gardening success. The easiest way that I know to do spacing is to use the square foot gardening method. You can find all kinds of resources about that online. But it basically divides your beds into square foot plots, and you can plant a certain number of plants in each square foot. In your email, you'll have spacing guidelines. But with raised beds, you can grow a whole lot more than you can in traditional rows. Right here, you can see that Matt and I are dividing his bed into square foot plots. I'm standing in the bed, and that's the last time I'll stand in the bed is when I'm dividing the plots. It's really hard on the bed to compact the soil. But we're dividing those into approximate square foot planting spaces. And in the next screen, you'll see some examples of how much you can plant in each square foot. For example, you can plant 1 broccoli plant in a square foot. You could plant 12 carrots if you had a deep enough bed, which we don't yet this time around, but next season you could. You could plant 4 marigolds, 9 radishes, or 12 green onions. You have a link to every vegetable and its measurements on your email. Starting seeds is pretty easy. They're pretty small and they send way too many in every package for a small garden. But you take a seed and you plant it 4 times the depth of the diameter of the seed. Pat the seed down into the ground and water in gently. Here you can see Matt. He's making 9 holes per square foot to plant Swiss chard, I believe. He's putting the seeds in about 4 times the width of their diameter and patting down the soil over top. We're going to add some mulch in a little while and water them in very gently so that it doesn't move the seeds. He's putting 2 seeds in every hole. I always put 2. If I put 3, I have way too many that germinate and come up, and then I have to thin them, and that always makes me feel bad. I don't like to thin. So I usually put 2 seeds in every hole, and if something doesn't germinate, I'll go back and put a transplant later. Transplanting is a really good option for beginning gardeners. You can't get all of the varieties that you want around town usually, but you can get a good start. And transplanting is pretty much instant success. When you loosen the plant from its container, make sure you spread out the bottom roots so that they're pointed out away from the root ball. Usually they're pretty compacted when you get it. So you spread those out and you bury the plant about an inch above where the dirt is if it's a taller plant. And there I am just putting it into the ground. I've already loosened up the roots and pat it down pretty firmly. They tend to float up when you water them. That's how you loosen the roots. You just kind of pull them away from the center and point them out. You're not going to hurt the plant. It seems a little bit rough, but they'll thank you for it later on. That's a basil plant. We're pulling off the flowers so that it doesn't go to seed, so that it will keep producing leaves rather than finishing. And you just dig a very easy hole with your hands. It's so simple when you've done the raised beds. You don't need a shovel. You don't need any tools. You just build a little hole with your fingers and pat down pretty firmly. And again, you can use the square foot garden ratio to figure out how many plants you can put in per square foot. The last step in planting your garden is the mulch. Especially in this time of year, it's just so hot, and that, even if you water and soak your bed, the bed can dry out within the hour. And so I'm putting a very, very thin layer of hay over the seedlings that we started, very thin. It doesn't look so thin on the camera as it really is in real life. They don't need a lot of resistance, but at least the hay is going to keep the moisture in for just a little while. At the other end of the garden, where we put the transplants, Matt's watering underneath, and then we're going to put a very thick layer of mulch at the other end. The plants that are already out of the ground could use, up to a couple of inches, really, of mulching material. I use hay. A lot of people say, well, you're introducing weed seeds to your bed. Weed seeds are not something you're going to keep out of your bed. They can blow with the wind. They'll come in any way they can. And so as long as you keep it deep enough, once the plants get up, it really won't cause a problem. I like hay. It's cheap. It was about $4 to $7 for a bale that big, and that's way too much. And here's Matt's finished product, his fully mulched and planted garden. Container gardening is the other thing we're going to talk about today. It's a very fast way to get a garden going. You can use just about anything for a container. Buy the cheapest soil you can find because you're going to amend it. You remember the ratios for amending, or you can look back at your lesson from last time. You're going to add the complete organic fertilizer to make your soil good. And the general rule is that you plant a tall veggie or herb in the back, you plant a medium height one in the front, and then you do a short one or a trailing one, or a short mid-sized one in the middle. You can also do trailing herbs around the front as well. So Matt's doing his complete organic fertilizer, we've just put a bag of cheap potting soil in the red container, and he's going to do 3 cottonseed meal parts, 1 kelp meal part, 1 blood meal, and 1 lime part. And he's going to go ahead and put that into the soil. Now, instead of just letting it sit on top in a garden container, I usually go ahead and mix it in throughout the entire container. In Matt's garden container, we put some low-growing herbs, some thyme up front. We also added some other things around the front, chives and another small basil plant. It's not going to be a very big basil plant. But then we added this trellis in the back, and that's going to be for cucumbers. And we planted the seeds of cucumbers, and there is enough time right now for them to grow into maturity before frost date, but not for very much longer. So that's parsley that we added into his container, and he's doing the same thing. He's loosening the roots and making a little space for them, patting them down, and then he'll water those daily. It's so hot right now in Mississippi, you really need to water your container gardens daily. If you miss a day, that's the downside to container gardens. They really don't have the root depth to make it. In raised beds, once your cardboard is broken down and the roots can go deeper into the ground, they really can make it a day or two without watering in between. Not initially, but once they're established, they can. And you can see how that one's really root bound, and we're breaking apart those roots and taking them, pointing them to the outside so that they can gather as much nutrition as they can. Because your soil's so amended in the pot, it's pretty strong, so you can plant things a lot closer together in pots than you normally could in the ground. We're looking at the zone that we're in and making sure that the cucumbers have enough time to mature, and according to that package, they do. Not all packages have the dates on the back, but if they don't, it's always something you can look up online. The source, again, that I really like is All Things Plants. It's just the easiest one to use. The Farmer's Almanac also has a planting guide, and MSU Cares, the site that I'm adding in your email, has another guide for spring that's really good. So again, you're going to plant those seeds 4 times the width of their diameter into the ground, pat them in firmly, and then water. And there's Matt's finished product. Your homework this week is to get onto All Things Plants, look at the dates, and choose 3 to 4 fall garden veggies that you want to grow. Go online and order a packet of seeds for each type. You might want to go ahead and get your spring seeds too, so you won't have to worry about them. You can store them in the freezer. And then create your garden plan on grid paper so that it's ready to go. September is the perfect time to plant fall vegetables.